Elise Mercier had never intended to keep bees in Paris. She was a city-born architect who had once sketched bridges on café napkins and filled notebooks with the iron lacework of balconies. But in the year her mother died, she found herself ignoring blueprints in favor of the old smoker and veil her grandfather had left in the attic. She set 2 weathered hives on the zinc roof of her Montmartre apartment building, where purple rooftop irises bowed to Sacré-Cœur and window boxes spilled geraniums over wrought iron railings. She told herself she would care for the colonies only until the grief lightened. The grief lingered, yet the bees stayed. They foraged among catalpa and chestnut trees, lining the boulevards, sipped slender trumpets of honeysuckle in courtyard gardens, and navigated the emerald maze of the Jardin du Luxembourg. Their honey shifted with the seasons. In spring, it tasted of linden tea sweetened by cool rain. In summer, of white acacia and crushed apricot flesh. And in autumn, of roasted chestnuts sold in paper cones along the Seine. By the 3rd year, Elise's Miel du Toit appeared every Saturday at a tiny stall in the Marché des Enfants Rouges, its jars sealed with scraps of violet ribbon. Tourist couples bought the honey as souvenirs, but regulars came because the flavor changed with each batch, like a jazz riff altering familiar chords. One Saturday in late June, Elise carried a tray of jars still warm from bottling. She had worked through the dawn, worried because one colony showed signs of varroa mites. She poured the last jar too full, a bright thread of honey wicking down its side, and instead of wiping it, she brushed the spill with her finger and licked it, tasting lime blossom and the faintest trace of sage from a neighbor's rooftop planter. The flavor was so startlingly clear it made her throat ache. She labeled the lids Récolte 27G, Tilleul en Sauge, and set them out. Near noon, after the market rush dwindled, a thin man in a gray linen coat paused at the stall. His hair was peppered with silver, though he could not be more than 40. He wore dark glasses, even in the shade of the awning, and his hands were bare of rings or a watch. He spoke with an accent that placed him squarely among the left-bank intellectuals of an earlier era, precise, almost cautious French. "May I taste the batch marked 27J?" he asked. Elise offered the tasting spoon. He took a dab, closed his eyes behind the lenses, and breathed in as though he were pulling the honey, not only across his tongue, but into his lungs and the chambers behind his forehead. When he opened his eyes, there was something glassy about them, like he had glimpsed a memory too intimate to describe. "How many jars of this batch exist?" he asked. "Only 8. I would like all of them." She raised an eyebrow. "I sell them equally, monsieur. 1 per customer, so everyone may enjoy." He hesitated, then reached inside his coat and retrieved a business card. It was creamy stock bordered by a faint silver line. The name printed in modest Garamond, Lucien Pascal. Elise nearly dropped the jar. She knew that name as any Parisian who read glossy fashion magazines did. 10 years ago, Maison Pascal had released Vierge Noire, a tuberose and smoke fragrance that turned the industry upside down. 3 drops on a pulse point, and people swore. Strangers leaned across metro seats to inhale. Then, in the winter after the launch, Lucien had vanished. Rumors said a laboratory fire destroyed his sense of smell. Others whispered heartbreak or agoraphobia. The fashion editors stopped guessing when new labels rose to occupy their columns. Maison Pascal's shuttered atelier near Place des Vosges became a wine bar. "You're him," Elise said, then regretted the bluntness. "I was," he answered quietly. "Now I am only Lucien. I live near here." He gestured vaguely toward the maze of side streets. "I have not made perfume in years, But your honey? He paused, tapped the jar with one bone-thin finger. It contains a note I lost. Linden, yes, but something else. A breath of, how to say, the first kiss of evening. Elise blushed. She pretended to rearrange jars to steady her voice. The bees found rooftop sage blossoms. That's what you're tasting. Lucian nodded as if she had confirmed a suspicion. If you will not sell me all the jars, will you sell 3? She studied him. Behind the glasses, his eyes were paler than she expected, a shade between ash and pewter. There was a loneliness in the set of his shoulders, the kind artists captured in statues of saints who crave divine company. Against her better judgment, she wrapped 3 jars in brown paper and traded them for cash. As he turned to leave, he said, I may write to you. Your email? She scribbled it on his card because refusing seemed impossible. That night, Elise checked her inbox repeatedly while tending the hives. No message arrived. She dismissed him as a curiosity. A ghost resurfaced, then gone. Yet 3 days later, an email appeared. Subject line, the kiss of evening. In it, Lucian described how he had opened a jar, warmed a teaspoon over a candle to release volatile oils, and inhaled until tears surprised him. He said the honey smelled like the last moment before darkness rises from the Seine. Not night yet, but possibility. He asked, with patient politeness, whether she might allow him to visit the hives. He offered payment for her time. Elise answered that bees dislike strangers. Still, if he brought no metal instruments or cologne that could mask pheromones, she would consider it. The next Sunday he arrived at sunrise, while Paris was still washing its stone steps with dawn light. Elise led him past pigeon-pecked tiles to the hives, their cedar slats humming. She fitted him with a spare veil. He didn't flinch when bees landed on his cuffs. He remained so motionless they crawled over his gloves without stinging. What do you hear? She whispered. An orchestra tuning, he replied. Violins first, then cellos. He raised his head. The city below is percussion. Elise removed a frame, heavy with capped honey, and watched his face behind mesh. Awe, but also calculation, as though he catalogued each aroma thread. Do you want to smell it raw? She asked. He nodded. She uncapped a comb edge with her thumb. Amber beads glistened. Lucian leaned, inhaled, eyes fluttering shut, and took a trembling breath, like a man resurfacing after holding his breath too long. When he exhaled, 2 tears slid along his cheeks. I thought I had lost this sense, he murmured. It left with my heart. Elise said nothing. Grief inhabited her too, though they wore it differently. They stood until the sun fully cleared the horizon. A bee settled on Lucian's veil, brandishing its hind legs dusted with pollen, like a vendor offering saffron. He smiled. After that morning, they corresponded daily. Lucian asked endless questions. The moisture percentage Elise targeted before extraction, the orientation of hive entrances, the altitudes of window boxes. He confessed he tested microdilutions of the honey with absolutes of iris, osmanthus, and vetiver, seeking a chord that vibrated like the Seine's silver under moonlight. Nothing matched. Elise, in turn, asked why he stopped perfumery. He spoke obliquely of a partner named René, a chemist who handled synthetics in their laboratory. A spill, a spark, a plume of aldehydes, and René was gone, his lungs scorched. Lucian's guilt clogged his senses for years. He could smell but did not trust his nose. So he retreated. He mixed small candles for neighbors, but never sold another perfume. One afternoon in mid-July, Elise arrived to find Lucian waiting beside the hives, holding 2 objects, a leather-bound notebook and a slender glass vial. The notebook contained formulas he had scribbled the night before. The vial held a first trial blend, labeled 1A, Cure Préliminaire. Smell? He asked. Inside the vial, the honey note rode atop bergamot in something peppery. A faint accord of charred wood anchored the sweetness, giving it gravity. Elise inhaled, and for a moment, she was 16 again. Leaning off Pont Neuf while fireworks cracked over Bastille Day crowds, she tasted smoke drifting over spun sugar and the starch of her linen dress. She opened her eyes to Rooftop's glowing peach with sunset. "It's beautiful," she said, then surprised herself by adding, "but incomplete." Lucien looked delighted. "What is missing?" "Humidity," she answered. "That thickness before summer rain. My bees fly lower then, heavy with water." Lucien laughed, the sound rusty but free. "Petrichor, Iso e super, and Geosmin, perhaps," he scribbled. Over the weeks that followed, they met daily in his sparse apartment, whose only ornamentation was shelves of brown glass bottles labeled in neat script. There were drawer pulls, but no doors, as if Lucien feared barriers. He taught Elise how to evaluate top, heart, and bass notes, how to reset her nose with coffee beans, and how to identify the exact instant alcohol flashed from a dilution, leaving pure aroma behind. She, in return, educated him on bee dances, royal jelly, propolis tinctures, and the mathematics of swarm logistics. Their conversations braided chemistry with biology until they could not disentangle them. Through collaboration, they became less guarded. Elise spoke of her mother's last breath, saffron thick from morphine, and how bees' soft buzz muffled hospice machines. Lucien spoke of René's laughter echoing in the marble lab corridor, and how, afterward, even soap's lather smelled like accusation. They argued, too. Lucien relied on synthetics to broaden accords. Elise favored naturals and worried about solvent residue. Once she slammed a bottle of heliotropine onto the work table so hard it cracked. They stared at the spill, its almond marzipan smell saturating the room. Lucien fetched vinegar to neutralize it. Elise fetched her apology. Yet, each quarrel drove the perfume closer to balance. They named the penultimate version Songe d'Abeille, but Lucien changed it at the 11th hour. "Too cerebral," he said. "Perfume must live on skin, not in dictionaries." August heat hit Paris like a brass cymbal. Tourists queued for the Louvre, while locals fled to the coast. Their apartments shuttered. On a breathless evening, Lucien and Elise stood in his atelier, perspiration beading on their upper lips, as he added a single drop of Absolute from a vial labeled simply E. "What is E?" she demanded. "In a moment," he whispered. He shook the mixture, waited precisely 100 seconds, then dabbed it onto the inside of Elise's wrist. The alcohol evaporated. The scent rose soft as wings unfolding. First, the lime and sage honey, then a pulse of warm skin, then something unmistakably human. Heartbeats, parted lips, the hush before a yes. It was an aroma of being smelled by someone you love. Elise felt her eyes sting. She pressed her wrist to Lucien's nose. When he inhaled, his shoulders shuddered. "That note," I added, he said hoarsely. "It is Orris, aged 10 years. René's favorite. I stored it for his memorial scent. I thought I would never use it." Elise covered his hand with hers. "He would be proud you did." They stood so close, she felt his breath through the veil of heat. Somewhere below, an accordion played La Vie en Rose, cliché and perfect. Lucien lifted his other hand, tentative, then cupped her cheek. For the first time since grief claimed them, they tasted hope on the air. Pollen bright, irreversible. Their perfume still lacked a name. Lucien suggested resurrection, but Elise shook her head. "It sounds religious," she said, "and this is secular. It belongs to lovers and bees. At last, they settled on arôme d'amour, simple as bread. Now came the practical hurdle, bottling and launching. Lucien feared media spectacle. Elise had no capital. They decided on a soft unveiling at the September Nuit des Parfums, a charity gala hosted on the terrace of the Palais de Tokyo. Lucien's old acquaintances controlled the guest list. He persuaded them to allot a discreet booth. In the final week of August, while she transferred 90 milliliters of concentrate into neutral alcohol to create what perfumers call juice, Elise received notice that her building intended to install rooftop solar panels. The hives had to be removed within 2 weeks. Panic stabbed her. Her bees, her heartbeats, where would they go? She tried reasoning with the landlord, but he cited insurance. She left his office shaking. That evening, she told Lucien, voice cracking. He listened, then squared his shoulders. "We will relocate them to my building. It's taller, better sun exposure." "But your roof is slate," she said. "No railings, too steep." "Then we will build railings. I was raised by a stonemason. I can hammer a joint." He placed a hand over hers. "These bees gave us a future. We will protect theirs." For 48 hours, they hauled lumber, brackets, and bags of terracotta ballast up 4 cramped flights of stairs. Lucien, once reclusive, waved at neighbors who stared. Elise smoked the bees and transferred the colonies at dawn, guiding the queen cages while Lucien held a flashlight. Not a single sting landed on him. The bees, she noted, had accepted his scent. On the night of Nuit des Parfums, Paris unfurled its velvet sky. Designers in silk gowns and velvet dinner jackets drifted among booths strung with fairy lights. Lucien wore a simple black suit. Elise, a tea-length dress the color of acacia blossoms. Their booth was unadorned, save for a glass cloche sheltering a honeycomb and a single crystal atomizer. A sign read, "Arôme d'amour, une collaboration apicole." Guests curious about the beehive decor paused. Lucien greeted them with the ease of a man reborn, spraying a whisper of perfume onto paper blotters. Elise watched faces shift from polite to startled joy. Some exhaled as though memories flared. Others raised phones to scan QR codes, directing them to a website Lucien had built at dawn. A tall woman, with the unmistakable poise of an editor, stepped forward. "Monsieur Pascal, the rumors of your return are true then?" He nodded. "But it is not my return alone. It is ours." He gestured to Elise. The editor smelled the blotter, then removed her glasses, eyes shining. "It smells like love beginning before you realize it has." Her voice cracked on the last syllable. Elise, heart pounding, asked, "And love continuing after?" "Especially that," the editor replied. Orders flooded their website before midnight. Boutiques in Tokyo, Dubai, Sao Paulo. Lucien promised only 1,000 bottles. "Exclusive," he said, "to protect the bees." Elise laughed, understanding the joke. Scarcity as virtue, yes, but also acknowledgement that honey harvests could not be rushed. At 2 a.m., long after the last guest left, they stood alone on the terrace overlooking the Seine, where reflections of street lamps danced like sparks from an unseen fire. Lucien reached into his pocket and withdrew a slim vial. "Batch number 0, he said, "undiluted, for you." Elise uncorked it, let one drop fall onto the hollow where her collarbone met shoulder. The fragrance bloomed, and Lucien leaned forward, inhaling not with the analytic caution of a perfumer, but with the unguarded hunger of a lover. She cupped his face, and in the hush of Paris they kissed. Slow, certain, honey-sweet. Below them, barges horned good night. Above, his rooftop now hummed, where bees rested in combs that smelled faintly of sage. Life goes on, Elise thought, but sometimes it circles back. bringing pollen from old blossoms to new hives. When they broke apart, Lucian whispered, "Do you hear it?" "Hear what?" she asked. "The orchestra," he said. "The violins. They're tuning for dawn." She listened. In the distance, early morning traffic began its low percussion. From the river came the watery brass of a tour-boat horn. Somewhere, bees would soon launch into the dawn air, wings vibrating like strings, bowing the first note of a symphony. Elise smiled. "Yes," she answered, "and the conductor has struck his baton." Hand in hand, they walked home along the quays, carrying between them a perfume that smelled of linden and sage, of rain-damp stone, of grief transmuted, of hearts unlatched. It clung to their skin like promise, enduring through the warm September night, announcing to the awakening city an intimate truth. Love, like honey, finds its way into every open space, seals sorrow with sweetness, and glimmers whenever the light is just right.